Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin.
Jonathan Goodman, my good friend, author, father, architect of several successful fitness businesses and brands. It's great to have you. It's been a while. And, we are releasing this right around the time of your next book, The Obvious Choice, which will
don't break the fourth wall, man. No, this is live. We're doing this right now, coming to you in your ears. This is us in this moment.
Everybody believes that. Sure. All right. The Obvious Choice. Why was this book important? Why was this the next step, the evolution of Jonathan Goodman?
The evolution for me is because I realized very, very clearly that my thing is writing. My thing is authorship. I think that perhaps the hardest thing that we have to figure out and that we're tasked with figuring out today is what game we decide to play. The Obvious Choice ostensibly is a book about appreciating the fact that there are different games that you get to choose to play in business and in life these days. And choosing the game that you play, learning the rules out of it, and playing the hell out of that game while simultaneously ignoring other games, or appreciating that there is perhaps good information about other games that's not good information for you, I think is one of, if not the most important things that you have to figure out these days. The Obvious Choice, it's a book that really came to be because of a lot of the frustration bubbling underneath the surface of people who are building their businesses these days in ways that is unnatural to them, in ways that is inauthentic to them. They think that the way to get a few customers is to try to impress the internet, and that is simply ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with trying to build an online profile, but you and I are aligned here, I think, Andrew. It's a savings account. An online platform content is something that I believe that everybody should do, but you have to look at it as a savings account. You invest into it with excess time and capital. You hope that it kicks off interest in the interim, but you do not build your business in a way that depends on your online persona to shoot off short-term dividends that fulfill your short-term needs. Instead, you look at it as investing into this is a term from you, investing into your career capital over the years. But that's not how we're made to think these days. And so the book came to be because a lot of the people that we work with, coaches, are sitting here thinking that they have to somehow game the algorithm this week in order to get attention, in order to question mark, get customers.
I think there's a bit of a post-rationalization where people are saying, well, I'm doing it for the business. And I think they're actually playing status games because they see other people in our world, high status individuals, they crave that. And they go, hey, I want to play that game, but I'm going to tell a narrative. We'll get into story after because it's a common theme with your book. It's like, no, I'm doing it because it's going to help build my business. It's like, I think they're doing it for the wrong reason. And then they're slapping on it a more emotionally satisfying and socially acceptable justification. Because this is something I love. Because
tell me more about this.
So humans are we are pattern recognition machines, but we are post-rationalization machines. Our brains slap logical sounding justifications for emotional or instinctively wired decision making that we do. Okay. But if we're going to say, well, I married my wife because I thought she was really hot. Now, guess what? On your media, you're hysterical about how you talk about how your wife is incredibly attractive. She's also a doctor. She's amazing at a lot of different fronts.
Her name in my phone is Hot Wife.
There you go. But how many people will also grab onto all the other things? They may be true, but people tend to, well, I don't want to sound vain or shallow or any of these sort of things. Yeah. So most people will dress up the underlying primary motivation, that primal instinctive motivation to buy a car. Like, hey, I bought a Volvo because, it's the safest car. No, you bought a Volvo because in some way, shape, or form, you wanted to socially signal the status that you were the person who thinks about safety of your kids.
Yeah, right. Yeah, why we do something is not why we continue doing that thing. Like the flickering of a fire, right? It's the light that attracts us. It's the warmth that keeps us there. That's a great woman. We're we're often attracted by how somebody looks. That's not strong enough to keep you there. And perhaps social media is the same way. I've never thought about it that way, but I think ego 100% has a lot to do with it. There's a couple lines in the book, what's good for the ego is bad for the wallet. A lot of people these days are rich with likes and poor with dollars. But you don't see that a lot. And so anyway, so you asked what led to the book. I mean, it was a lot of these frustrations bubbling underneath the surface. People have now been working long enough and hard enough, doing enough of quote unquote the right things online, and not gotten the type of success that they think that they deserve, that they probably do deserve, in response to the time and efforts and money often that they put into it. And so what's missing? Do you need a little bit more time and a bit prettier photos? Probably not. And so this book is what's missing. And what's missing is actually it's much more profitable, it's easier, it's simpler, it's faster to become the obvious choice to a few people than just an okay choice to many. What would you rather have? 25 wealthy and well-connected people in your neighborhood who live within a 2-kilometer radius of you look at you and say, oh, he's the guy for that. Versus 5,000 people on the internet who you don't know where they live in the world, who kind of think that you're interesting to look at or fun to look at, or they liked the fact that you pointed at words in space, aligned with some trending music on a reel one time, or had something interesting to say about mobility one time on a video. Like, nobody hires people like that. And it's not, I mean, this is where the reality kicks in, is like, look around you at all of the things that you own that are on you right now. Think about the last, I don't know, call it 5 things that you bought, 2 things that you bought, whatever you can think of in your head, people you hired. Do you even know if any of them have a social media account? Like, think about the shirt you're wearing, the microphone, that I'm using. Think about everything that you have in your pockets, in your house, around whatever. Do you even know if those companies have a social media account, let alone whether, if that impacted your purchase, even if you came across somebody else talking about their thing? Well, what actually happened there? Somebody else, an influencer, call it, decided to do a review, or they thought that for their own clout online, they were going to talk about this other product that was not built up as a result of social media. It was built up based off of the principles in this book. For clout, they talked about this thing. Well, that might be fine. That might be how you found about this thing that you own. Do you care about the person who spoke about it? Like, the answer is no. You don't at all. It's completely irrelevant. And so think about what you're doing, put it through that filter. Do you think that you talking about fitness on the internet to a whole bunch of people who listen to a lot of people talking about fitness on the internet, how are you possibly going to stand out and be the obvious choice to them? When kind of by definition, I don't care how good looking you are, there are better looking people on the internet. There are people who are more attractive, funnier, better at production quality, more entertaining, and have more resources than you do. And so how, like, you're competing in the bloodiest ocean out there.
And it's going to get a lot worse with AI stuff, because AI will create, if your whole identity and brand is how you show up on social media,
yeah,
your looks, your messaging, whatever, there is going to come down the pipe a massive amount of artificially generated content that will do the content better. It will play hooks and social media better cuts, better video editing, and all the stuff that you have branded yourself around will be done better by AI, and you will be non-existent.
Well, that's a whole different conversation altogether, but hell yeah. I mean, I think, taking this like even more global, we can talk about AI and what content's going to do to AI. I mean, if you want to control a society, if you want to distract people, what you do is you overwhelm them with more information. You don't block them from information. You overwhelm them with so much. I call it the ain't nobody got time for this shit problem. It's so impossible for anybody trying to make a decision to even begin to comprehend how to start to make that decision these days, because there's just so much overwhelming information, and that's only going to get worse. But think about like when and this is interesting because we could talk about the 4 stages of content. This is actually the part of the book that you're in, Andrew, so we could talk about that. But I do think that you should always create content, but I think that you should do it for different reasons. But think about if you're doing it to try to attract customers, if you do it, which is why most people say they're doing it, right? If you do it because you think that you want to attract, think about who you're competing with on whatever platform you're on, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, it doesn't matter. You're not competing with other people who sell what you sell. You're actually competing with full-time entertainers for attention. And so you are trying to do this in the 30 minutes that you have in between clients, in between whatever you're doing. It's their full-time job. And it might be multiple people. Like the top podcasts these days are production teams of 15, 20, 30 people. I mean, these are basically television productions. That's who you're competing with if you're trying to become a famous podcaster.
And we just
You're
saw
not competing with other podcasters in your niche for attention. Now, if you create a podcast trying to become the obvious choice to a very select, smaller amount of people, and you don't look at the data and the stats that the podcast platforms, you don't care if you ever get to a top 100 podcast. It doesn't matter, because the quality of listener is much more important than the number of listeners. It's about picking your game. It's about picking the game you're playing and understanding those rules.
There's sort of an interesting contrast in where a lot of the theme of the obvious choice is to narrow down. You don't generally use the word niche, not as far as I've seen in the book yet, but sort of it's identifying a narrow, you play deeper, right? You're not going as wide, you're going deeper. And yet the book itself is a progression of your career almost in the opposite direction, where you came from a narrower space, that is the fitness industry, and it is step into a broader genre. So why make that pivot now in your career?
So I'm going to answer your question with a wide-ranging answer. I'm going to get into the 4 stages of content, because what I'm doing is I'm slowly navigating into stage 4. Call it thought leadership. So let's start at the beginning. There's 4 stages of content over the course of your career. I'll name them off quick, and then I'll tell you a little bit about each one. Right? Stage 1 is you create for yourself. Stage 2 is you create for your customers. Stage 3 for your industry. And then stage 4 for the world. Stage 1 is you should actually start creating content as a way to learn. The best way to learn is to teach. As you are studying, if you actually want to retain as much as possible and learn how to apply it, teach that to somebody else. I don't have time to get into it here, but in the book, I talk about leapfrog learning. I talk about my method of learning mediocre to low-end skill sets that compound upon one another over time, over the course of your career, because, industry-specific knowledge has diminishing returns, but when you combine that with other complementary leapfrog skills, you start getting exponential positives in success in your career. And so how do you do that over the course of 60 days? What you can do is you can actually give yourself a mediocre to low, call it like the 80-20 of a new industry. And so content is a great way. At the beginning of my career, I mean, I didn't know that I was doing this at the time, but I look back and it was a very important part of my story. My first ever blog was called championlifestyle.com, and it was awful. I pulled the whole, I know I've been gone for a while, guys, but I'm back now, and I mean it this time. I think I pulled that 4 times. But looking back now, I had 1 comment in 3 years. It was from my mom. It was on the first article. Like, nobody read it. But looking back now, it was so important as I was developing myself as a personal trainer, because what I was doing is, as I was studying, as I was reading, I was writing articles about it. They were plagiarized. They were not good. They were not written well. It doesn't matter, because they helped me learn faster than other people who were just reading, than other people who were just listening. And as a result, I progressed faster than they did. Not because I'm smarter, because when you teach something, it forces your brain to do something very unnatural, which is take that same information and verbalize it and explain it to other people who aren't you, who you don't know what they know or their backgrounds and biases, which forces your brain to maneuver around this information in a new way. So stage 1 is You should always be creating content no matter what stage of your career that you're in, but you should not measure the success of that content based off of who pays attention to you. You should not care. You don't even need to promote it. All that you're doing, do a podcast, do videos, do Instagram. I don't give a shit. Create content around what you're learning. Stage one. Get your customers in your real life with people who are already connected to you in some way or have reason to trust you in some way. There's no way that you're going to be able to stand out in the bloodiest ocean that has ever existed in the history of our world in marketing, which is social media, when you're new in your career. It's just not going to happen. Step two is you create content for your existing customers, for your clients. And so if you've progressed through stage one, you have customers now. What you do is you start answering their questions with content. Nothing that you know is unique or different than what a lot of other people already know and already talk about. But it doesn't really matter because it's useful. It can help people solve their problems and answer their questions. And so you don't look at that as a way to generate any types of new customers. What you do is you look at that as a way to perhaps nurture people who have already come into your ecosystem who may not have reached out to you, but were told about you, retain your existing customers for longer, or generate referrals. And so as your clients are asking you questions, you start answering them. My second blog was jonathangoodman.ca, and that's what it was. I gave a monthly award to my clients. I called it the half badge, which stood for hard as fuck. I gave it to whichever one of my clients was the hardest of fuckest. And I wrote why they were so great. Well, that half badge generated me referrals because they showed it around. Because, they won an award, right? But also I would answer their questions. Somebody would ask me, somebody told me that fruit makes me fat. Does fruit make me fat? I wrote an article on that. That's probably article 50,000 on the internet of why fruit makes you fat or doesn't make you fat, right? But my clients liked it. And because I was writing for one specific person answering this question, the material started to resonate. These things naturally started to get passed on and found. And so the way that my story goes is some of those early articles did get discovered on that blog. I became a contributor to Arnold Schwarzenegger's blog. I was named one of the 24 best trainers you've never heard of by Livestrong. I was included in a men's health book. I can't remember which is the men's book of abs or whatever. I contributed a workout. People started to discover me because I was doing good work. But what's interesting about this is, number one, despite all of these things happening where the articles were going viral and I was getting included in all this conventional media, it did not generate me a single client. Not one, ever. Ever.
I remember when you texted me the day that I was published in Arnold Schwarzenegger's Pump Club, his email newsletter. Yes. You messaged me and asked me how many new followers I'd gotten on Instagram because I had tagged up my story and Arnold. It's not actually Arnold. It's, whoever runs his Instagram.
It's Adam and Ken.
Yeah. Right. Then it got reshared through Arnold's thing. I got a screenshot of that. That's cool. And you asked, and it did not generate any clients or any new following because my answer was people are there in that blog for Arnold. Their relationship is with Arnold, not with me. The content, great, fine, whatever. It's the big value for me is it's a piece of career capital that's now on my website to basically be able to say, hey, I did this, right? Which is also a bit status play too.
Yeah, it's cool shit. It really is. For meatheads like us, it's really cool to be able to say, Arnold or Arnold's team recognized me as a leader in the industry. That's cool as shit. Personally fulfilling in a way that more clients would not have been personally fulfilling. It really was. And then, over the years, perhaps, I have those icons on my website. Sure. They don't hurt. Do they contribute that much to clients? Maybe, maybe not, but they certainly didn't add anything short-term in terms of, at that point it wasn't social media, but in terms of clients and things like that. And so I believe that almost everybody should stay at stage 2 for just about the entirety of their career, where what you're actually doing is creating content, wherever you're creating content, whether it's a newsletter that you send out to clients at your gym, whether it's a podcast that you record, that you send to your clients about, questions my clients ask me, whatever, that might spread, it might not, but you don't measure the success of that based off of conventional engagement metrics. Because what that allows you to do is it allows you to document the stuff that you do so you don't answer the same questions twice. You can send somebody a piece of media that you've already created answering their question. It allows your clients to have something very easy to pass on to somebody else if they want to talk about you. It's a retention thing. And in my eyes, this is like most all of the benefits of content without almost all of the negatives of jealousy, of burnout, of comparison, of this ego-driven drivel that we all kind of fall into. And then over the years, if you continue to make these small deposits, like a savings account, you're going to wake up one day in the future and you're going to say, how the hell did all this money get here? But that's not going to happen if you continually try to make withdrawals as you're making deposits. That's not how compound interest works. And so it's the same thing. Now, if you decide, which again, you don't have to progress into stage 3 of content, what you actually start doing there is you start creating content for your industry. Think about think about the people that you follow on social media. It's other people doing the same thing as you, isn't it? If you need to hire a plumber, you're not going to be following plumber influencers on social media. Plumbers are going to be following plumber influencers on social media. We're too close to our own world, so we don't see it. But the vast majority of what anybody purchases ever are items and services that they are ignorant towards. You're ignorant towards almost everything you buy, so am I. I'm not saying you're stupid, right? Stupid is based off of IQ. Stupid is a general statement. I'm not saying you're stupid. Ignorance is domain specific. You're ignorant towards almost everything that exists in this world because there's just too much stuff to think about.
When people read your book, they're going to, and we won't spoil it, but there's stories right up front about how you bought a television and how you chose your financial advisor. And you talk about explicitly why those were, looking back, they were dumb decisions. They were
embarrassingly bad decisions. And how we found a doctor to treat my wife for her cancer.
Yes.
Embarrassingly bad decisions.
But also get the book to get into those, but it'll make the point.
But also very human decisions. This is how humans decide. This is how humans buy things. This is how you buy things.
And it goes back to this, everything is, I actually, when people talk about there's rational decision makers and emotional decision makers, I go, bullshit. It's all emotional decision making. I just think that some people are better at dressing it up rationally, and some people are a little bit more honest about emotion. And yes, of course, there's a bit of a spectrum there. But I do think that a lot of the decision making it's emotional. Your book does a great job of this. And then I just want to direct people to the fact that question your stories, question your narratives, question the basis of your ego and your identity. And this can be a very difficult thing for people to do because people would rather stay fixed in a place rather than to deconstruct, well, why am I stuck in place, whether it's fitness, life, career, etc. Because a lot of people craft stories and narratives about why they can't change, I'll give you a really good example because we're coming up on just after New Year's here. I have a theory that a lot of New Year's resolution behavior is a deliberate attempt to reinforce a fixed identity. Most people, they start New Year's because they've had a creeping emotional discomfort with their level of fitness, their metabolic health, etc. And so they say, okay, I'm going to change this year. This year it'll be different. I'm going to go to the gym 6 times a week. I'll never have sugar, alcohol ever again. They try to white knuckle their way through. They do not possess the skill set. They do not create the support environment. They just dive in, join a gym. And what they're subconsciously doing is making the effort, a token effort to, after 5 to 6 weeks, to be able to say to themselves, see, I tried, I can't do this. I proved to myself I am not the kind of person who can do this. So it alleviates the emotional discomfort that had built up so they go back relieved of that discomfort for a while until it gradually creeps up past the tipping point where they go and they do it all over again. And I believe that's what's going on.
It's interesting. You've thought about that a lot harder than I have.
Yes.
It's interesting. Super interesting.
It boils down to fixed identity. And I think most people would rather tell comforting lies than to confront, uncomfortable truths about why they are stuck where they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to continue doing something, even if that something is not working or serving you, than it is to change. I mean, this goes down into how we educate ourselves in the fitness industry, isn't it? This is the Leapfrog skills and Leapfrog learning section of the book. Like, you would have a hard time arguing with me that industry-specific knowledge does not have serious diminishing returns at a relatively low point. Once you become good enough at fitness, you need to complement that with other skills. And the reason why a lot of people are frustrated because they're not having the type of success that truly they do deserve in return for the time and money and effort that they've invested into their career is not because they aren't good enough at fitness or nutrition or habits. It's because they're actually too good at that and not good enough at all of the other things that they need to be good enough at. And so, you question why this is. And it's because, quite simply, it's easier and more comfortable to learn more about the thing that we already know a lot about. We can read another book about training postpartum mothers, for example, about menopause, about whatever our clientels are. And because it either reinforces what we already know or bridges off of things we already know, it actually doesn't challenge you very much. It feels comfortable. Now, imagine if you were to read a book that gets into finances and business finances, and you have to learn about monetary policy and debt and investments. And that is more important once you're 2 or 3 years into your career, like learning how money works, than reading another book on menopause for many people. But because it doesn't bridge off of something you already know, you run away from it. And so what we get, and the trap that people fall into in our industry a lot, are people who quite simply are just so focused in one direction and never surround themselves with these complementary skills. I mean, look at me. Like, I would have defined myself as being a mediocre to just okay personal trainer. Like, I was fine. I had a kinesiology degree. Like, I was fine. I don't think I was great, ever. If you were to look at my programming back in the day, if you were to look at my ability, my knowledge of biomechanics and motivational interviewing and that, it was low to medium in any of those things. But it was good enough. My clients were happy. It was solving their problem. But what I also got good enough at was behavioral psychology, was writing. And then, I started to add on to that more and more and more. And so if you looked at my skill in any of these things independent of one another, I would not have stood out in that industry in any way. But because I was able to complement my low to mediocre skill set as a personal trainer with a low to mediocre ability in writing and knowledge of behavioral psychology and, money and whatever, well, I was able to just jump past the rest of my colleagues back in the day. And, I've just continued to push that same idea across. I've just added more things in and up-leveled some of those skills. Like, I would now consider myself to be a medium to pretty good writer, not a low, and then I've added in other skills like business and management and whatever, but they're hard. Like, it's really hard to sit down and try to learn about something that's very, very important that you otherwise have no knowledge of. But our value doesn't lie in how good at one thing we are, but in range. It's the range of the different skills, of the different abilities. But getting back to the stages of social media content. So if you decide to progress into stage 3, what I think you should actually do is start to create content that your industry will resonate with. You basically start to say things that other people who already think like you already think and want to say, but either are unable or don't have the time or are unwilling to articulate. So, I mean, what's my social media? How did I build up my social media? I basically just said stuff that other personal trainers already thought, maybe a little bit more succinct, maybe not. And then the ones that seem to resonate, I just repeated in about 100 different ways.
You created social currency. This is our strategy when you and I talked about this initially. You took years of knowledge, marketing, writing skill, etc., and you created resonant message, and it was social currency. What did people do? The plan was the people who are already there would go, this is great. Yeah, I agree with this. And they share it out, and then everybody else. And there's an underlying theme of this. And you've talked about building your career capital and accomplishment across career. I knew when you started doing this that as soon as all these other trainers saw one of your slides shared in someone's story that they followed, they went, oh, God, that's John Goodman. I've read Ignite the Fire. I've read so-and-so. I saw him speak at this thing, whatever. Follow. And you would soak up all these people who knew who you were, but had not hit that follow button yet. And sure enough, it exploded. But it wasn't because, your social media was very savvy. Yes. Content was great, but it was heavily built upon years and years and years of all this other stuff you did. I did the same thing with Joel Jameson and his exploded, same strategy, because Joel had years of accomplishment, including walking into rings with UFC champions.
Sure. But most people, there were some that knew that. Most people did not, though. Over time, you would be amazed by how many people that follow me on social media have no idea about anything that I've ever done outside of Instagram. Like no clue, none. Never seen my name or my face or know who I am outside of there. And so, yeah, I think there was some of that. But if I'm honest with you, I think you might be overstating it a little bit. I think actually it comes down to representing yourself as a leader in the industry and repeating messages that your industry wants repeated. And over time, those will start to become resonant. Now, if you are not legitimately successful in other areas, it doesn't make a difference. You have to have something that backs up, because there inevitably people are going to be attracted to you, maybe from like some little snippet, right, that you put out. But they're going to look a little bit deeper. And if you got nothing other than you figured out a way to maybe entertain around an idea on the internet this week, people aren't going to give you much stead. So if you're able to point towards a brick and mortar thing that you have, maybe look successful, or in my case, even if they haven't bought a book, they might look and be like, oh, like there's a book, or like HarperCollins is publishing this guy. Like clearly there's something here that is a little bit more interesting, a little bit more in depth. So there has to be something of substance, but I do think that you are perhaps overstating.
I think it was
for
the
social
initial
media
push.
success. Yes.
I think it was the initial push.
Yeah.
But again, the quality
You
of
got
the
to break
content.
through somehow. You got to break through somehow.
You said it as well. I think it was on the back of your presence and authority and knowledge base shone through the content, but that's built on the back of years of having been a thought leader. And I've used that phrase myself numerous times about when you were talking about things in the industry. I tend to perk up and listen because I'm like, I want to hear what John has to say about that.
But I wouldn't have considered myself. I mean, I still don't consider myself a thought leader. I put thought leaders in such high esteem. I'm hoping to enter into that space, but I don't think that I'm there yet. So, stage 3 is you become an industry leader. And in stage 3, there's a lot more opportunities professionally that begin to present themselves to you. And so stage 3, basically, you create an audience of your own industry, and then you listen to them, and you listen to what they need, and then you can maybe build those businesses to serve them. Now, in my case, that's largely education and software, but in some cases, this could be goods and other types of goods and services. You don't necessarily even need to build it. If you were an industry leader, for example, you could become an affiliate or a promoter of other services or products, or you could just buy a piece of the company. For example, like I bought a piece of a company in a space with baseball cards and collectibles, right? And so you can start buying pieces of those companies as you accumulate more resources. Either way, or you could just listen to your audience and then build what they want. So, when you're in stage 3, the idea is now you actually, you've been in the industry for a long time. You can begin to scratch your own itch, and you have the distribution network that you need to be able to quickly test and iterate on minimal viable products and then run with the ones that work. And so that's been the progression of my career, has been to, let's talk to people. Crazy idea, I know. 137 phone calls. Let's hear about what your frustrations are. Let's hear about what your goals and aspirations are. And I'm going to turn around and build it. That's how 1K Extra, which turned into the Online Trainer Academy, came about. Even Quick Coach, I advised almost every other software company in that space. for 8 years. And I was like, Quick Coach is what's missing. I'm not going to build the same thing as everybody else. That's insane. They have more resources than I do, network effects. They have more ambitions to get outside funding and whatever than I do. But Quick Coach is a competitive advantage that only I can tackle because I already have a brand and distribution network and expert status within the industry. Think about every other software platform that exists for personal trainers. None of them have a recognizable public figure who's behind them. That is a massive competitive advantage if you are in a business like mine where you want to build something where your customer acquisition costs are as low as possible. And so that's why I entered in the market the way that I did and didn't enter in the market to compete with the Trainerizes of the world, which I think do a great job. But my goal is not the most powerful software. I think that there are already incumbents who do a very good job with that, and they're way ahead of me. And so, in stage 3, you kind of have this opportunity. When I started to enter in stage 3, I started to be an affiliate. I started to promote other people's stuff, started to earn revenue there. I don't think that it's possible to build an audience and build a product for that audience effectively at the same time. It's just too hard. It's just too much to do. And so as I was building my audience, I started promoting other people's stuff to start making some money. And then I took a step back from building my audience. Actually, I delegated some stuff away is what I did. Hired editors and writers and stuff for the blog. And then I started building my own things and started promoting other things less. And then I just started to build congruent businesses on top of one another, all serving the same audience, right? That's the beautiful part about the business model that I've been able to build over the years is I've tried so much. Like I've done 8 digital programs. I've done 5 conferences, 3 membership sites, a certification, 12 books, a software platform. I actually added it up for the first time ever. I've built 7 different unique verticals where I've built businesses in that have generated a minimum of $100,000 in revenue. 7 different kinds. And so over those years, you start to throw away the stuff that doesn't work that well, and you keep the stuff that does work well, and you build on top of it, and then spin people within the same ecosystem, right? Somebody who buys the Online Trainer Academy might use Quick Coach, then becomes aspirational to the Online Trainer Mentorship, is probably going to, buy my other books like The Obvious Choice and Ignite the Fire and stuff like that, right? So you see how this lifetime value starts to build as these businesses that operate independent of one another, with operators who operate independent of one another, but customers spin naturally within them. It's a huge competitive advantage. You can do that in stage 3. It takes time, of course. I would say that I entered into stage 3, 2012, 2013. It's now 2025. So give it 12, 13 years. And then, eventually, maybe you might decide. This goes back to answering your question about 30 minutes ago, Andrew. You might decide that you want to enter in for reasons that might not be logical, that might not be optimized in terms of how much money you could optimally make. But at this point, it should not make a difference. Money should not be your main driver anymore. You might decide to attempt to enter in thought leadership space. Thought leadership is about the earned reputation of the individual, not about the quality of content. Elon Musk tweeted this thing about sleep a while back, and I saved the tweet. I gave the example of the tweet in my book, but it was a basic tweet about like how to sleep better, right? Elon Musk tweets it. 30,000 retweets, 360,000 likes, right? I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this tweet. Maybe this tip on sleep is really good. So I copied it. And I tweeted it myself. Now I wasn't at that point. I was not doing much on Twitter. And so I had 1 like on the same tweet. And it was from that guy who probably has a bot that likes everything that I do. You know that guy. Thought leadership is about the earned reputation of the individual. The difference was that he's Elon Musk and I am not. It has nothing to do with how well he spoke about sleep. You earn that over time, and it takes a long time. I am now 14 years into my career online. I've written over 15 million words on the internet. All of those books and products and wins and losses and everything in between has led me to the point where I'm like, I feel like I've got some stuff now to say that has pretty valuable general applicability. And I feel like I've done enough reps of figuring out how to say stuff that is unique and interesting and consumable in a way that I think has a chance to break through. But at the same time, I don't think that you should read a business book, for example, from somebody who needs the money that's going to come as a result of that book. Like, I'm at this point in my career where I don't need the money from the book. And so I can play a much longer game with my books. And it's something that I can't not do. And so, yeah, sure. I got a great advance on this book. I got a great advance in the next book. I've had great support from HarperCollins. I think the product that I put out, I'm incredibly proud of. I don't know whether this book will be really successful. I don't know whether the next one will be really successful, or the one after that, or the one after that, or the one after that. But for whatever reason, for whatever masochistic part of me that exists, I can't not write books. It's what I was very clearly, uniquely built to do. And so this is the game that I'm playing as I'm in stage 4. And you bet your fucking ass I'm going to work at this.
Not all of Shakespeare's plays are hits. Not all of Picasso's paintings are legendary. And not all the Beatles songs are #1 hits. John,
how many books does Seth Godin write?
Yeah.
And how many of them were good?
Where can people find you online and go grab a copy of the book?
Okay, so I'll tell you the book first. The book is called The Obvious Choice. It's published by HarperCollins. It's anywhere you get books. So get it wherever you want to get books. Buy the book. It's in Kindle. It's in Audible. It's in hardcover. Buy the book. Andrew, you and I are aligned on this. The minute that I see a book that sounds remotely interesting, I buy the damn book. I don't even think about it. It is the single best investment that anybody can make. There are even books that I have on my shelf that I have never opened because I bought them and they sounded interesting and I have good intentions, but maybe I'll never open them. But I look at the spine as I walk by, and the spine reminds me of something that person said one time on a podcast. And that reminder is more value than I invested in the book, even if I don't crack open the book. So buy the damn book. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm at it's. Send me a message anytime, chat anytime, but I'll also just make a deal. Like, buy the damn book. I'm going to say that over and over and over again. If you don't love it, you can also message me and I will give you back 100% of what you spent on the book. So buy the damn book.
It's an incredibly well-written book so far. I'm partway through. Thank you for the copy. And
wonderful.
I mean, I'll grab it. Any book you ever write, I will buy it because I endorse both you and your ideas. I've been following you for a very long time, long before we were friends, long before you started investing effort. I wrote something on social media recently about your efforts to invest in me long before my social media grew, and I've recognized that for a long time. So thank you, my friend. For everybody listening, this is obviously one of the new format podcasts. This one definitely did get a little bit more career oriented, but I still think there's a lot of general principles for everybody. So I want to make this podcast grow. I want to put it in the hands of more people. I pivoted away from conversations that are coach, trainer, fitness industry specific into conversations that are meant to help the end user, because that's the person I can have the greatest impact on. Coaches are going to listen and love this anyway. Share this with the one person in your world that you think this would really help. Share Jonathan, share my podcast, and thank you. I really appreciate everybody listening. Thank you, Jonathan. You're always incredible, and good luck on the book launch.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.